All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is a Monday. So we had a great weekend. I enjoyed my weekend. Actually spent time on Saturday. That was the day, of course, of the No Kings rally and also Trump's military parade. What was it? 250 years of the U.S. Army, I think, was the kind of the justification. Although it was on Trump's birthday, very fascisty, certainly. I think I got a picture or two of the military parade down Pennsylvania Avenue. Okay, it was kind of went over like a thud, right? It was a real bomb, not a successful event. As far as I can tell, people really weren't into that at all. Democrats pretty much, staged their own resistance events that were far better attended Saturday, called it No Kings Rally. So it's supposed to be kind of a nonpartisan, I guess, or anti-Republican, anti-MAGA versus pro-Democratic. But there was a heavy Democratic hand that was visible, that was observable in many of those events. I actually didn't attend any No Kings Rally. I would have. Honestly, I would have. Even though, if they're Democratic aligned, I'm against them. I'm against them. But I would have gone and worn my pro-Palestine keffiyeh, and I would have worn my shirt, my anti-Israel shirt, and I would have been there to try to persuade folks who, very correctly, very understandably don't like Trump, fear Trump, think Trump is a menace, to try to persuade them, yes, he is all of those things, but so are Democrats. We have to come up with an alternative. But I wasn't able to attend because I was at the Green Party's 25th anniversary in Maryland gala, I guess. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. It was really nice. It was a good event. I wish there had been more people, but it was pretty well attended, and certainly got to hear some good speeches, especially by the Maryland gubernatorial candidate he's running to be the Green Party nominee. He isn't the nominee yet. I want to be very, very clear. That's Andy Ellis. So that's what I did Saturday. But I know people who went to those no Kings rally, no Trump rallies, and we'll talk about those in just a moment. Also juxtapose with the Greens, what they're up to. But first, as we do here, and of course there's really been a major escalation. I would say Israel's really waging war against Muslims. At this point, it would seem to be there's a real Islamophobic element to what Israel is doing, or at least, I don't want to make it all about religion, but certainly Israel is going to war with anyone that could possibly stop its genocide or is trying to stop its genocide. And that's awful. It's terrifying. It's so bad. So we'll keep tracking what's happening between Iran and Israel. I'd have to guess turn in my Jew card because I really am rooting for Iran to hit Israel. I really am. I really want Israel to get, to feel some of the pain that it's inflicting on others around the region. And it hasn't. The people of Germany really didn't turn against the Nazis at any point, but the closest they came, they finally started to, really show resentment towards the Nazi leaders, Goering, Hitler. They would make jokes, called Goering Mayor, because I guess it's a Jewish name. He said, hey, if any bombs hit Berlin, if any English bombs land on Germany, you can call me Mayor, meaning because Meyer or Mayor would be maybe a Jewish name. I wouldn't have thought so. I'd say Goldberg or something, whatever. But the bombs did hit Berlin. And when they did, and when the German people started to feel the pain of war that they had, with parades and flags, happily inflicted on the rest of Europe, the pain, the death that they had rained down on Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Southern, throughout that continent. It wasn't until finally the Allied bombers started laying waste to German cities. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. It wasn't. But that's what caused the German people to finally turn to a degree against the Nazis. They never rebelled. And, you know, when you look at that history, you realize that killing civilians doesn't really change much. It's rare that you can win a war by killing civilians. People might say, well, look at what Sherman did in Georgia. He marched to the sea. He laid, waste to a good chunk of Georgia and then went north into South Carolina. So that's an example of a war of terror that actually ends the war. But it wasn't that. It wasn't that the terror against the Southerners who were terrible, the slave owners. And that was pretty much who Sherman went after, was the slave owners, the aristocrats. And understandably so, of course. But that's not what really ended the war. What ended the war was when the Confederate armies were surrounded on all sides, and Lee had no choice but to surrender or have his entire army, which was starving at the time, be, either, well, if he didn't surrender, they would have just kept shooting at him until they were all killed. 240-242-5646 if you want to join me. Would definitely love to talk to you. 240-242-5646. 27 more Palestinians killed by Israel, and I believe that's just today. That's just Monday, so that's not a 24-hour count or anything like that. But I did want to show that headline because this is what Israel does. Israel shoots. They open fire on hundreds of people waiting near aid distribution sites in Gaza. This is with unquestionably genocide. This is Nazi behavior. And what I can do, how can I persuade people of this? I just don't know. I just want so badly for people to understand what Israel's doing is so wrong. And then, maybe if we get enough of us to pressure the Democratic Party, we'll actually do something. I'm not super optimistic, but I don't know what else can cause change. But an influential, powerful political party that champions an end to our support for Israel. That is a popular position. That is a position that would, in fact, carry the day at the election box. But we haven't had a chance to vote on it. But if enough Democrats start to say, you know what, if we don't oppose genocide, if we don't oppose Israel, we'll get voted out of office, that might make a difference. Or alternatively, let's just vote them out. That's what I like. Now, the reason I say it might make a difference is some people say, well, the Democrats just care about getting reelected. But that's not true. They don't just care about getting reelected. They also care about their golden parachutes. They also care about being able to trade stocks based on the insider information that they glean as members of Congress. They also care about all the nepotism that their children, from which their children benefit. So it isn't just that they want to win elections, because they take often positions that are relatively unpopular, pro-corporate. But they're willing to do that because they're setting themselves up. Even if they lose an election, they're setting themselves up for profit down the road. So I think we have to, it's not just enough to vote Democrats out of office. We have to replace them with progressives. And that means Green Party. That means independence, truly independent, not like a worker family party or what have you. Now, there might be one or two good Democrats. I've got my hopes pinned on Zoran Mamdani. And yeah, if he wins, that's a good thing. We'll see. We hope. Join me, 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646. Here's your numbers from Gaza. The count there continues. Obviously, every single day, things get worse and worse in terms of the number of dead, the number of wounded, the number of children killed. It just won't end. Israel and the U.S. have killed a minimum of 55,432 Gazans, including 225 people Friday through Monday. That's today, March 18 through June 16. Also today, Trump and Netanyahu have killed at least 5,149 Gazans, and likely over 2,000 children. So, and I guess you saw that picture, right? I mean, the raising of Gaza, it is biblical. What you're seeing now is Israel replicating scenes from the Old Testament, where the Hebrews, whatever they're called, they just simply sow fields with salt, they raise, and not necessarily them, right? They're enemies as well. Practice genocide, destroy cities completely. I think Joshua did that at the Battle of Jericho, killed all the men in the city. So this is what we're seeing right now, is a return to that kind of eye for, 10,000 eyes for one eye, right? Because we saw a few, less than 1,200 Israelis killed on October 7, and less than 1,000 civilians, if you include in that 1,100 count, if you subtract from it, I should say, the Israeli military, the troops who were killed, there were police killed. If you remove from the number, people on duty, police, uniformed officers, if you remove from the death count on October 7 in Israel, the officers, the military, the enlisted, etc., you have under 1,000 killed. Israel's responded by killing over 55,000 now, right? Over 55,000. So you're basically 55 or 110,000, 110 eyes for every 2 eyes, basically, or 55 eyes for every. And that's just in Gaza. We're not even talking about all the killing by Israel in Lebanon, in the West Bank. So I know people may get sick of hearing me talk about this, but this is the crime of our time. This is the murders, this is the slavery. Now, I don't want to see people say, well, you can't really compare. And I don't like to do it. I don't like to say, well, one's worse or one's less awful than the other. You look at the number of dead, you look at the percentage of people who were in a particular group who were harmed. You look at how long it went on. Obviously, slavery was a terrible sin that went on for centuries. The transatlantic slave trade, slavery has been part of the human experience. Genocide has been part of the human experience. But this, to my way of thinking, right now, what Israel's doing is comparable in terms of just the outright evil that we're seeing right now to Nazi Germany, to the enslavers during the transatlantic slave trade. And you can look at other examples of slavery, like Roman slavery, and that was really bad. That was really, really awful. You were a slave, you had to do exactly what your owner told you, your enslaver told you. But at least when it came to the Romans, slaves often were freed. There was not, I believe, multi-generational slavery. Your father was a slave. That didn't mean you were a slave. So there were different. It was as bad as it was. It wasn't quite as horrible as what the Europeans practiced in this area, this world, this hemisphere. There's a tank rolling down. No, it's not Unter den Linden. I think that's a street in Berlin. No, that is not Unter den Linden in 1934. That would be Pennsylvania Avenue in 2025, June 14, Saturday. And I was just like, how stupid is this? Really? You're going to send one of those super heavy armored vehicles down Pennsylvania Avenue for what purpose? What's you're tearing up the roads. The Army said they would pay for any damage. It was going to be very expensive. I don't think they were necessarily jazzed about this. It's just a complete waste of everyone's time and energy. And I don't even think, I haven't heard, if you're a Trumper, if you're a Trump supporter, Call in. I really want to hear. MAGA, you think this was a good idea? You think this was a good thing? Please. I'd love to hear it. We got a call last week from a Israeli supporter. I love the conversation. I love the back and forth. You know I'm polite. You know I'm respectful when I have disagreements with people or they have disagreements with me. It's all about trying to learn from each other. Maybe there's some reason, some sensible, rational argument for doing this. I'm not aware of it. And again, most people didn't respond. You can see the crowds are relatively sparse there. There are not that many people. Here's a better picture right in front of, it's kind of funny, right? You're like, really? This is what you're spending our taxpayer money doing? I can't really get it. I'd love to. I get why people voted for Trump. I totally do. Elections are choices. I've said this over and over. Elections are choices. The Democrats provided you with an awful, awful choice, a terrible option. I think the Republicans gave you an equally terrible choice, maybe worse. You want to say Trump was even worse than Kamala? I'm not going to argue with you. But if you're a working person who's working 3 jobs in Muncie, Indiana, or is it Illinois? I'm not sure, one or the other. Muncie. Let's go with Bloomington, because there's an Indiana, Bloomington. Well, Bloomington, Indiana is a pretty nice city, so probably that's more elite. But whatever. Choose your city. You're a working class person in the heartland. You're working 3 jobs. You're barely making it. Trump's talking about tariffs and bringing jobs back. It's pretty darn appealing. And his opponent is laughing and saying it's a tax, which it certainly isn't. Reflects both ignorance and incuriosity about how you actually create jobs in America. I totally get why you would vote for Trump. Trump says, hey, I don't want more people to die in Ukraine. I get it. That's a good argument. He's right. People shouldn't be dying in Ukraine. So if you want to say to me, well, how Kamala wasn't as bad as Trump, I'll say, okay, that's fine. But just because I sort of agree with that sentiment, that doesn't mean that people who are very differently situated, who are struggling, who have in the past seen their lives ruined by offshoring, by the military-industrial complex. I'm not going to tell them that they're some monster or they're stupid or they don't understand politics because they supported Trump. I'm not going to do that. You want to beat this guy? Come up with better candidates, come up with better policies. All that said, I want to hear. If you think this event makes any sense at all, I'd love to hear it. Really, why? What's the value to America to have like these giant U.S. Army, stanchions or whatever you call those things, those risers? Why? What are we getting out of that? Nothing. Just a huge waste of taxpayer money. Now, at the same time, I saw so many. I was out there. I was driving. I drove from to Annapolis. Drove back from Annapolis to Montgomery County, where I live in Maryland. But also drove out there, and I saw a lot of people on bridges, and they were holding anti-Trump signs, and I liked it. I was good with it. Here's I can take my little oval out. This is L.A., right? This is L.A. Look at that crowd packing the streets. This is from, I guess it was an AP picture. Let me see. I've got the credit at the bottom. Editor's note, obscenity. Yes, you can see an F sign in there. I don't like that. March in the No Kings protest with a Trump balloon. Why I really wanted to show you this is because the organizers, and I called it anodyne, right? Meaning like not partisan, not controversial, kind of down the road, beige, oatmeal, right? Not particularly, in any way spicy, we're just all against Trump. Trump's awful, F Trump, right? But nothing like we're not for anything. But you can see in this LA crowd, there are some Mexican flags, and they're definitely anti-ICE. So those are policies, right? I mean, that's not anodyne. And a lot of Democrats, or at least the indivisible people, apparently they didn't want that. They wanted a very, very just partisan, hyper-partisan, meaning Trump sucks, Trump's evil, Trump's bad, replace Trump, F Trump. Trump is the entire raison d'etre for these No Kings rallies, rather than, hey, we don't want kings from either party. We don't want tyranny from either party. We don't want endless war from either party. We don't want genocide from either party. We don't want ecocide from either party. That is not the message Indivisible wanted. But they couldn't completely stifle it. And in Los Angeles, you saw, and it makes perfect sense because there's so many Latinos. And by the way, I know I say that with like the little Spanish, and I always hate when other people do that. So I'll try to say it with just the English accent. There were so many Latinos in Mexico, so obviously they are in Mexico, but also in Los Angeles. So you're not going to be able to keep them out of that rally. But obviously, if you're too vocal against ICE at these rallies, you will turn off some working class American Democrats. But when I say American, people who were born in America, even whether they're Latino or not. I mean, some Latinos, some African Americans, some white Democrats are all not supportive of the immigrants. And I think they're wrong on this. I mean, I understand the reasons because they recognize the reality that whenever you have more of something, its price drops. So when you have more workers, you have more laborers, then the price of work drops. So I get it. I get why they're upset. It's understandable. Their wages are under pressure from immigrants. But I think there are better ways than xenophobia. In fact, xenophobia is about the worst way to try to get wages up. But I understand it. I understand the rationale. So there you see that Los Angeles rally, despite the efforts of the indivisible organizers around the country to keep those rallies message free, except for the Trump bad message. There, the message couldn't be stifled completely. The pro-immigrant, the anti-ICE, which of course I agree with. The worst thing Trump does, the worst thing he's been doing until the genocide that he's now fully backs. And possibly war with Iran too, right? We're not clear on that. Well, he said he supported Israel's attack. He probably didn't like it at the time, as far as we know, but that's a terrible, terrible thing too. Israel's really putting us. I'm not talking a lot about Iran. I had mentioned that I think only if Israel really gets hit will there maybe be some public opinion shift against Netanyahu. And I just I can't have a lot of sympathy for the Israelis. I just can't, because they're all in favor. Even those who don't like Bibi, even those who want him out of office, there's no palpable pro-Palestine sentiment in Israel. So I can't feel much empathy towards them. I mean, I don't want anybody killed, of course, but I want Israel to stop its killing. And I don't know how that's going to happen unless the Israeli people feel some of the pain they're inflicting in their area. All right, so from the American Prospect, we take you around the country with dispatches from No Kings protests. By the way, join me if you can. Love to talk to you. We're live Monday, noon to 1 here Eastern Time. Give me a call, 240-242-5646. Scenes from a Revolution. We take you around the country with dispatches from No Kings protests, and that is the Prospect staff. So very interesting, and I was glad to see this, folks, because I really wanted to get some evidence of what I had heard, the scuttlebutt, the buttlescut, that the the organizers, specifically Indivisible. Indivisible is like the whole point of Indivisible, founded in 2016, 2017, right after Trump was elected. The whole point was, hey, Democrats, the left broadly, has to be indivisible. We're not going to fight. We're not going to argue. We're all together against Trump. Now, I think that's like the world's stupidest message. I totally oppose it. I think we have to be for something, not just against Trump. We have to be for good policies. There's zero reason, in my opinion, to just elect Democrats or to elect anti-Trump people unless they're good, unless they're for something. Not just, well, I'm not Trump. But that's not Indivisible's message. And they tried pretty hard to police the messaging at these events. So from the American Prospect. And I really wanted to get, and I got one or two from the Philly rally was enormous. I think Jamie Raskin spoke there. So again, you see the tight connection, the alignment between No Kings, Indivisible, and the Democratic Party. This was a Democratic Party event. And that's why a lot of people on the left didn't want to be part of it. You know, that's why the Green Party didn't want to be part of it. I think we should have been there. I think we should have, if we had the ability, we could be in two places at once. We couldn't because we had that anniversary event already scheduled. But to the extent we could be in two places at once, I would have loved to have been at these events and say, hey, here's why Trump is bad. Oh, and by the way, a lot of the things he's doing that are bad are exactly what the Democrats do too. That's why I'm a Green. That's why you should vote for me for governor. But here's what the American Prospect writes. Mild but palpable ideological divisions were observable throughout. I witnessed an indivisible organizer directing people away at JFK Plaza from a more radical Palestine-focused march. And one of the pro-Palestine marchers said, hey, a big problem I have with No Kings is that they use a good protester model, said a protester. He said they want to be less radical and more palatable to get more middle-of-the-road liberals, when in reality these struggles are all connected. Well, first of all, 100% totally correct analysis. And yes, they do want those Chuck Schumer, white-collar, suburban voters. That's exactly who Indivisible is going for. The one thing they don't want are the rabble, the workers, the folks who are, really not, have been left behind, the many millions, the tens of millions, the 100+ million Americans who don't have $1,000 in the bank. That's not who the Democratic Party wants. That's not who Indivisible wants. If you're in that group, you're basically homeless. I mean, you're quite possibly literally homeless, and you're also, metaphorically without a political home. I wanted to show just a couple more pictures. So you saw in LA, despite the best efforts of those Indivisible people to have the good protester model, we don't want to offend people, we don't want to turn people off, we don't want to piss off the folks who, those illegals, the good immigrants are the ones who waited online and followed the rules and waited their turn. And now they're these bad immigrants, these illegals. We don't want them. We just want the good one. We want the good protesters. Meaning, I guess, people who have homes, people who have more of a stake in supporting the status quo to a degree. Here's Philly, and I'm sorry I don't have a better, but there was a really good bird's eye view, and I was really impressed by how many Philadelphians showed for this event. I mean, it was really a big number. It looked huge from the sky, from the air. But I just got this. I don't know. I lost the picture I had. For some reason, I clicked out of it stupidly, and rather than saving it, and then I went back and tried to find it, and I couldn't. I think I'll show. I may have it. I have a St. Paul picture, and I'll show you that. That's the thumbnail. But here you see, and I do have the orange oval that's vertically vertically, the vertical aspect there, the not orange, magenta. There's a magenta oval, and you can't even see from that picture. I'll make it bigger. That magenta oval is around a Palestine flag, a pro-Palestine flag, or a Palestinian flag. So there was at least one. There were more than one, because the shot, the overview, the overhead shot really showed just how, showed several pro-Palestine flags. So there were some there, and I'm going to see if I can really blow this up a little bit so you can see just how, by the way, this is from WHYY, which is a Philadelphia news organization. So there's the flag. You can see under the magenta in the sort of the right-hand center of your screen, as you look at this on your YouTube or your Facebook, you can see the Palestine flag. But there weren't a lot of them. There weren't a lot. It wasn't centered by any means at the march. I think it should have been. I think that immigration, absolutely, especially because you want to reach as many people as possible. And we know that the Democratic rank and file voters have turned against Israel. They are now siding with Palestine. And that's despite all the Hezbollah. New York Times came out with this absurd editorial. This is another one. Oh, anti-Semitism is such a big problem. Genocide isn't. I haven't seen one op-ed from the op-ed nothing that says genocide is a problem. But anti-Semitism is a problem when people shoot or threaten or menace Jewish people while shouting Free Palestine. That's proof that they're somehow anti-Semitic, rather than maybe they just want to free Palestine. But still, anti-Semitism is a big problem. People say this who have never faced anti-Semitism. I hear from people who say, oh yeah, we Jews are under so much attack. I'm like, well, what's happened to you? Give me an example. And they don't have any. Well, I haven't actually seen any. Nothing's happened to me. Maybe someone looks at you funny. People might crack a Jewish joke, right? Oh, no. I'm not saying that's okay. But somehow to equate that with what Israel's doing in Gaza, to somehow say, well, just because Israel's doing some bad things doesn't mean it's okay that it's open season on Jews. No one says it's open season on Jews. But, Israel wants you to believe that. Israel wants, they put a Jewish star in their flag and everything, so they want you to think that anything Israel does is the Jewish people doing it. And then if you criticize Israel, you're really anti-Semitic. And the New York Times is playing along with that nonsense as well. But despite all of that, despite all the efforts on CNN, Joy Reid, the one sort of quasi, not particularly vocal pro-Palestine voice on that network, gets fired. Despite all the propaganda on Fox. A notable exception to all this is Tucker Carlson. Of course, he doesn't work for Fox anymore. Despite all of that, Democrats at least have turned against Israel. You'd think the Democratic Party would kind of get that, but no, because remember what I said. They're not about getting elected, or that's part of it. Of course, they want to get elected because, you get elected, then you can keep getting graft, and you can keep, getting insider information that you trade on, and like, Ro Khanna and Nancy Pelosi, and make millions of dollars gaming the system. Sure, they want to get elected. I'm not saying they don't want to win their elections, but their motivations go beyond just simply winning elections. They're also, again, how do I make sure my nest is incredibly well feathered, even if I lose? And so and one way that you protect yourself is you side with the, when there's a conflict, you side with you take the side of the two combatants that has more billionaires, where the money is. And although there's a lot of Arab money, right? There's a lot of Arab oil, they really haven't championed the Palestinian cause. Whereas there's a lot of Jewish billionaires and Zionist billionaires, and they sure as heck have. And you want to stay on their good side, right? If you want to get like some of that Obama, we saw that Obama House. People are criticizing Obama, saying he wasn't pro-Israel enough. I don't remember Obama withholding arms funds for Israel. There were a few threats. People are saying Joe Biden, right? Because he would say, well, I don't really like what Israel's. These presidents, either way, they just give Israel everything it wants. 240-242-5646. 240-242-5646. So I do think the Democrats would be very wise. It would behoove them to adopt a pro-Palestine message, an anti-Israel message. I think it would also behoove them to certainly embrace a much more immigrant-friendly policies. Remember, Kamala was for building a wall. Kamala was pro, who was it? Who was, Biden, and especially Obama was the great deporter. I think they should be more pro-immigrant because it's right. It's morally just. It's not necessarily super popular, but it's correct. But if you're going to take that position, you have to be for the worker. You have to be for workers, period. This is not the message you want. This is absolutely the wrong message. I saw this on Facebook. This was like an anti-Trump, anti-MAGA page. This is the world's worst message. This is the world's worst pro-immigrant message there could possibly be. You mock people who are saying, hey, these workers who aren't in the country legally without documentation, they're working, their jobs, they're taking away from us. So you're saying this message is like, hey, it's okay to exploit immigrants. It's okay to pay them $5 an hour. Because do you want to have to pick fruits and vegetables in the blazing sun? Hey, how about we don't have people picking fruits and vegetables in the blazing sun unless they're getting really well paid for super hard work and they're getting lots of breaks and lots of water. I'm not saying we don't need, of course we should have agricultural workers, but they should be getting fairly compensated for super difficult work, for dangerous work. This is the absolute worst possible message. Oh yeah, it's fine. We want those immigrants so we can exploit them. Now you red state workers, you're going to lose out. You're going to have to pick the vegetables yourself. Well, you know what? I think a lot of those workers, those people in those red states are like, well, if you paid me $30 an hour so I could have a decent life, plenty of those red staters, they were going down in coal mines when they had to, when there was no other way to survive. They would do it. And a lot of them would die of black lung disease, either 30 years later, they would die when there was a cave-in, or they would suffocate from the gas. I mean, these people know what hard work is like for low wages. To try to, for people like probably lawyers and teachers and academics to post this kind of crap, this is how you lose elections. The Democratic message should be, we're going to, yes, protect American workers. We're going to protect the borders. We're also going to make sure that people who do work these really tough jobs get fairly paid for them. And if we need to, if after there's $25, $30 an hour to do these super tough jobs, the people are represented by labor, by unions, and we still don't have enough American domestic people in this country, citizens, to do the job, then we'll start letting in folks, but in an orderly fashion. On the other hand, we get it. Life is really tough in the global south. Those people are impoverished. They're terrible dictatorships down there, often with the backing of the United States government, the military. So we're going to address that problem too, so that life is better in Honduras, so that life is better in El Salvador, so that life is better in Colombia and Venezuela, so that the folks who live in those countries, in Mexico, aren't clamoring to come to the United States. That's the right message. Not, oh yeah, good news, red states, you can pick your vet. I mean, it's the guarantee, this is how you lose elections. But I guess there's a certain like, oh, they're so dumb, those people. They're so stupid. Look at how they're going to have to pick their own lettuce. Like, I just can't, I can't grok that at all. I hate that word grok. I'm about a conversation. I'm about a dialogue. I'm about trying to come up with solutions. That's not a dialogue. That's not a solution. That is a way you try to push people away from you. You try to mock them. You try to show them how stupid they are. Good news, red states. You can now pick your own fruits and vegetables in the blazing sun for $5 an hour. In other words, what's good, the good answer is you make immigrants do it. Right? You make illegals do it because they're scared they'll have to go back to, some horrible hell on earth, some narco state, which is like that because we send our automatic weapons over there, and because we destabilize their governments, and because we depose socialists, democratic socialists who win elections. So we're going to just keep making life miserable in the global south so that the agricultural workers there, the urban residents there are desperate to leave. They'll come here, they'll take any job, they'll work $5 an hour in the blazing sun and be grateful, like you should be, but you're not. That's the message that Democrats send far too often, and that is a losing message. 240-242-5646. Okay, so Johnny put a link in the Facebook. I don't know who that's who. Is that to you, John? Maybe that's to me. I'm going to guess it's to me. My good friend Johnny posting on Halitics on Facebook. I actually have a screenshot from Johnny's Facebook page. Also want to say, nice to see the number of subscribers continue to tick up. That's very, very positive. And I want to see you guys on Halitics as well, where we can debate issues. I'm not as good about posting in Halitics. I probably should post there more. I've been kind of a little bit just, I do my program and I'm kind of like move on. But that said, I do keep an eye on it. I do try to keep the discussion civil at Halitics. I do hope you'll join us on Halitics on Facebook. I am grateful to see more posts there. And one thing we do at Halitics that you will not find on a lot of social media is we absolutely welcome, we want debate, we want back and forth. It is absolutely the last thing we want is preaching to the converted, is echo chamber stuff, which is what I found, by the way, on Reddit. So Reddit is really frustrating because there are all these subreddits, and the moderators at those subreddits impose absolute ideological rigidity. You have to take their positions or they won't. They'll kick you out of the group altogether. So there's like the Bernie haters, the she-woman Bernie haters group. If every other post doesn't condemn Bernie for sexism, racism, then you're kicked out, right? That's what you have to present there. That's the antithesis of what I want. I want us to debate issues. I want us to discuss them. I want us to listen to each other. I was really gratified. So this guy, this was my competitor back in the day when I was in Monterey, and he owns the radio station up the road in Santa Cruz, KSCO. And, I give him a lot of credit. Look, I mean, I disagree with him on politics. I'm not thrilled with the fact that he peddled a lot of the snake oil, right, the pills, whatever, the herbal remedies and things. And he had hosts on there like Savage, who, are really bad, awful people. But all that said, Alex Jones, I was on that station as well. Maybe I'm wrong. Certainly Limbaugh. But yeah, he ran a local station, and I give him credit. He also had local hosts on, and he did have some diversity of opinion. So I give him all credit for all that, and just simply for keeping the flag flying for local radio. So good on you, Michael. And I'm featuring him now because my good friend in Santa Cruz, Billy, so shout out to you, Billy, gave me a text, actually. I spoke to him, though I called him, but he texted me to let me know that I had gotten name checked on KSCO. I was very excited, and I went back and I listened to the hour, and I had a lot of trouble finding it, but I finally did. It was the 10 to 11 a.m. Pacific time hour, Saturday, right? Because it's a Saturday special, 10 to 11 Pacific time. And he had on this guy, John Rothman, who supposedly at least calls himself a liberal. All I heard was a diehard Zionist. And I was really pretty grossed out, nauseated by the agreement between the two of them on the importance of the U.S. supporting Israel and how great Trump is and this and that because he's all in for Israel. It was like a knife in my heart. But there was this clip, so we got to play it for you. Is it going to play?
Great hearing John Rothman. MZ, it was a pleasant surprise hearing John Rothman on the Saturday special. I fondly remember calling John on KGO some years back and was very impressed with his politeness and especially that he was actually willing to have an intelligent discussion with my stark opposing opinion.
All right, I'm going to stop it there for a second. I'm going to play more. But just to underline what that caller is saying, they liked this guy, John Rothman. By the way, I may have heard of John Rothman. I don't think he was on KSCO, which was this 50,000 watt talker. Made a lot of money up into the 2000s, up until maybe the second decade, around 2010, 2011, they finally abandoned talk. Maybe it was even later. Maybe it was a few years after that even. I might have the years wrong. But they had been a top-rated AM talker for decades, I believe. And with many pretty well-known, very well-known hosts. Gene Burns, kind of more of a libertarian. Ron Owen, I think. Ron Owen, I'm not sure. Carell was a weekend host, if you remember Carell. Carell was also on KRXA, the radio station that I manage. So there was and it really interesting. They weren't to the left. I wasn't crazy about them. I don't remember John Rothman. I don't think he was a weekday host. I think he was a weekender. I don't really remember. But this emailer, and I don't know who it is, but I have a suspicion, is saying, hey, I disagreed vehemently with Rothman because I'm a conservative and he's, I guess, a liberal, but we would have good conversations. We would have the dialogue. So let's play a little more of that clip.
It is so unfortunate that there are not many talk show hosts and the left that are class acts like John. The only other one that comes to mind is Alan Colmes and possibly Hal Ginsberg. I know you knew Alan, and I don't know whether you know or know of Hal, but Hal used to own a radio station here in our same market. It was
I appreciate the very kind words. One of the tragedies.
Right, so he doesn't have any idea who I am, and he doesn't want to acknowledge, Rothman, that Alan Colmes was mentioned. I don't know. I think Alan Colmes died, right? Alan Colmes is dead. He was famous for the. Oh, let me get rid of that. Colmes was famous for the Hannity and Colmes, right? And then Hannity got rid of him, which I sort of wish he hadn't done. But Colmes was really weak, and he didn't stand up to Hannity at all. But I will say this about Colmes. He wasn't much on TV, but he was a good radio host. He was pretty strong on radio. I would have liked to have played his program on KRXA if I had been able to. I think he was owned by some syndicator that wouldn't make him available to us, or I don't remember. Maybe he was on a different station in the market, because usually they're always going to let you syndicate. I don't remember the details why we couldn't get Colmes, but I thought he was a good radio host. I wouldn't say he was great, but he was decent. He was more than decent. So I think that's fair. And I agree with the emailer who said you could have a conversation with Colmes. He did. He entertained people from all perspectives, and he would have a dialogue. Like, I called him up and I would criticize him from the left. I'd say, hey, you don't take Hannity to task enough. You let Hannity walk all over you. And he would have the conversation. He knew he did, but he was, what's he going to do? It was Hannity's show. It was on Fox. if he had pushed back too aggressively on Hannity's BS, he would have been S-canned. And even then he was S-canned, so I don't know that matters. But what I really like about that call, and I think I know who it was, or that email, or what, if they'd called, I would have recognized the voice if it's who I think it was. They were a regular, and they would call me, and we would have really, I think, good back and forth, good discussions. And I don't know that I convinced them very much, but every now and then they were like, yeah, you make a point. Yeah, you make a point. I think it's so important that we have these dialogues with people who have different views. It's absolutely impossible. And like I mentioned on Reddit, because Reddit has subthreads, and the monitors of the subthreads will absolutely, they enforce ideological purity on those threads. Not in every case, but I've been kicked out of the David Pakman subthread, which I believe he is maybe he's not, I don't know, some David Pakman fan, because I was critical of Pakman. So they kick you out. I was critical of, well, definitely of Hillary on a Hillary thread. I mean, you can't, there's not real dialogue. This is, by the way, exactly what you find at Daily Kos. Daily Kos says, hey, we're anti-Republican, pro-Dem. We view the Democrat Party as the antidote to the Republicans. If you don't like that, if you disagree with that, then don't come here. I don't understand that. I don't understand that view. Why would you say don't come here? Shouldn't it be all about a real, honest, back and forth discussion by, among people of goodwill who want something better? Are you so absolutely certain that Nancy Pelosi and Joe Manchin and AOC have your best interests at heart? Really? And if you are so certain, why aren't you about having a dialogue and a discussion about why maybe they don't? So this was on Reddit, and this goes along with that whole theory that Jews are under tremendous pressure, and we're all victims of anti-Semitism, and we're all being attacked, and our lives are in danger. So this person writes, heartbroken over comments from a relative. What the hell is happening? Yesterday I was talking to a relative who is much further left-leaning about the war. They made a comment about the Colorado attack, saying it's nothing compared to what's happening in Gaza, which is true. It is absolutely not. And they didn't like this comment. Are we really at the point where violent hate crimes against Jews are being normalized by other Jews in the pro-Palestine movement? No, they're being normalized by Israel, because Israel is committing genocide. And when you do that, when you insist that it's okay to wipe an entire group of people off the planet, you should not be surprised that those who are allied with you, who support you, or who, and this poster, by the way, says, I don't support what Israel doing, I don't do this, but that rally in Colorado was only for the hostages being held by Hamas. It wasn't for the over 10,000 hostages that Israel, 10 times, 100 times as many being held by Israel. That wasn't mentioned, nor was the fact that Israel has killed some of the Israeli hostages. That's not meant. But you can't have that discussion on Reddit. You're just kicked out. You're booted. That is a huge problem. Now, I contrast that, and that's wrong. That's why this program, I believe, is really important. That's why I want you to call in. That's why I want to have the dialogue, the back and forth, because only in that fashion can we maybe start to approach a consensus on how to address the problems we face. I remember, maybe Carl called in and said, I remember you 15, 20 years ago talking about why we needed a carbon tax. It was, by the way, 20 years ago that I started doing radio. And a lot of people disagree with you and took you to task, but I think maybe you were right. Yeah, you were onto something. The elites don't want to have dialogue. They don't want to have debate. They don't want to have discussion, or they want to constrict it. It's only Dems versus Republicans, not Greens, Dems, Republicans, libertarians, not all having some say, some discussion. No, we very, very intentionally limit discussion within two narrow, narrowly tailored viewpoints that we're comfortable with, that we're okay with. That's basically the media in America today. And even social media. So it's okay to have a Reddit thread where all you do is whine about how Jews are victims. But if someone tries to poke a hole in that reasoning or provide facts that don't jibe with the underlying theory, then they're kicked out, they're booted out. That's a recipe for warring camps. That's a recipe for endless feuds. That's a recipe for death, recipe for killing. That's normalizing violence. Now, I want to give you the why I actually, as much as and I'm not saying they're perfect, of course not. Oh, and by the way, did I tell you this? I thought and this may be a part of the reason I'm seeing a little bit more, just a little bit more distribution of my programs, getting a little more clicks, what have you. Not a ton, but a little more. Apparently, Facebook had at one point, and I saw a note on my page that I'm not monetized, so they couldn't demonetize me because they never monetized me in the first place. But they were no longer going to distribute my posts, which apparently there's some sort of a algorithm, right? So it's not only my friends, I guess, who see what I post, although I think it is, but maybe not, because I see posts from other people. I always thought those were advertisements, right? You had to pay. You had to pay to get your post seen by anyone but your friends on Facebook. But maybe that's not the case. Or maybe they just weren't showing my friends, because I have a lot of Facebook friends. They weren't showing my Facebook friends my posts. I'm not really clear. But they definitely said that. They were not promoting my page, is what they said. And now they are. They took the message that they're not promoting me was dropped. So that may also be part. So I was glad, because I had no idea why they had said they weren't going to promote me in the first place. There was nothing, as far as I can tell, that violated any Facebook rules. So the people demand, I posted this image, and my good friend Johnny, you see him there. Johnny, we got to get together at some point. So Johnny didn't like that at all. So he reposted it to mock me for it. Because there's only a few people in that picture. And it's true, it would have been nice to have a lot of people in the picture, but there weren't. But I wanted to get it because I love that message, right? The people demand, which is true, stop arming Israel. So Johnny posts that on Facebook, on his page, right? Because that was on mine, but he took it and he put it on his page, which is fine. Even if he disagrees with me, that's good. We should have a disagreement. And he and I have gone back and forth. What I love is that on Johnny's page, people disagreed with him. People's like, no, what about this? We don't agree with you, Johnny. And that's really good. That's what we want. It's good because I also disagree with Johnny. But I think it's so much better to have that in that debate than just, just cutting people off, just canceling them, which is what you see on Reddit, canceling people if they take a different position than you. Now, of course, if people are rude, insulting, attack you, you don't need to put up with that crap. But just because they disagree with you, even if they disagree with you rather assertively, I think we have a duty to listen to each other and to respond. And also to be willing to change our views if someone makes a good case, a good argument. I told you there was a friend of Halitics who's dropped me completely, ghosted me. He doesn't even just drop me, won't even respond to my texts, won't respond to my calls. And I did have a conversation with them at one point when they had no choice. I mean, I physically was in their face, and I mean, they could have walked away. They weren't falsely in prison or anything like that. There's no kidnapping, but generally we would communicate, and recently only virtually. So it's someone texts you, you don't respond to the text. Someone calls you, you don't answer the phone. Somebody emails you, you ignore it. But in this case, there was no way to do that. And they said, well, you were always arguing with me, or you were, beating me up or something about my positions. And I went back and I listened and I watched a video I had done. And yeah, I was getting hard. I was getting hard on them. I was getting a little, hot under the collar because they weren't responding, in my view. And maybe that wasn't fair, right? They can respond however they want. If I don't like their response, that's the end of it, I guess. But to me, that's not really fair arguing. That's not really good faith. I think you listen and you respond specifically to the points that are made. And I just didn't get that vibe. I got a vibe of, I'm not going to change my opinion. You're not going to persuade me. There's nothing you're going to say. I don't care what the facts are. And that got me really, really frustrated. But, again, life is, you get to live your life however you want. I think a better way to live is where you listen to people, where you're really, really open to different viewpoints. And I'm not hearing that. And I am, and I like to think I am. You want to tell me that Kamala would be much better than Trump? Well, maybe you're right. Maybe that's true. I'm not going to say you're wrong. I'm going to say I wasn't going to vote for genocide. And I have my, and I think it's a good answer to that is, okay, well, that makes sense. I can see why you wouldn't vote for genocide. If we don't listen to each other, then this is what happens. You have ICE agents beating people up, rousting them around, shoving them around, and then they go into a community and the people, and I think this is great, surround them. They get scared, they get nervous, they jump in a car, they zoom off, and then they get into a car crash. Well, it's not good about the crash, but it's good that they felt intimidated. But it's not going to change things. It's just going to make Trump double down. Because we don't have a political class that's listening. We don't have a political class that's saying, wait a second. We need to do this very, very differently. We need to treat our non-American born residents much better. We need to protect working people so their wages are fair and they can live a decent life. We don't want police or state agents going around in marked cars, shoving people around, deporting them. We don't want that. That's how we feel as Americans. That's not what the political class is listening to, is hearing. They won't hear it because that message isn't to their benefit. Their benefits come, their riches come, their elite status comes from keeping us at each other's throats, divided, fighting with each other. And so you see it there where the ICE agents were confronted, they were pushed around, and I'm glad they deserve to be. They should be. But in the end, this isn't going to solve our problems. What solves our problems is we unite and vote for good, progressive, populist leaders who take very seriously human rights and at the same time take very seriously the plight of working people to make sure they have enough. Then you wouldn't have this. You wouldn't have this. I did have a story. Maybe we'll talk about this tomorrow. I don't know with Arlen. Maybe with Arlen we'll talk. I assume tomorrow's an Arlen Tuesday. I assume Arlen, and I don't know this, but I strongly assume Arlen was at a No Kings rally. I think there was one in Monterey. So we'll talk more about that and what they may or may not have accomplished in his view, what his hopes were, what in his view things should be done differently. Of course, I'll ask a few pointed questions, but I won't be too difficult. Also, just want to share this. This is an image I put together there because he had a terrible, right? I mean, I mentioned when we don't listen to each other, when we're not willing to create a society that works for people, even not nice, Minnesota nice isn't so nice, and you have a guy there, terrible, just goes after former Minnesota Speaker of the House, I believe, Hortman, right? Melissa Hortman, is that her name? Just killed her. Just terrible. And It looks like her pro-choice views are what may well have motivated this this killer. This is a terror. By the way, terrorism. This is domestic terrorism. The desire to, the goal to scare Democrats, and also quite possibly change the balance of power in the Minnesota legislature to be Republican, because it's very, very evenly balanced. Terrible what's happening there, and terrible that there's this political violence from the right. I will be back tomorrow. It will be an Arlen Tuesday. Enjoy the rest of the day.